The brightest television in the store, the one that makes every other screen on that wall look washed out and cheap by comparison, might be the wrong one for the room you actually own. And the salesperson standing next to it will never bring that up, especially if your living room has real windows in it. So here is the question nobody at the store wants to answer straight. Between this year's two biggest flagship OLEDs, the Samsung S95H and the LG C6, which one actually wins once it's sitting in your house and not under showroom lighting? We are going to rank this head-to-head. No hedging. And we're going deep panel chemistry, gaming specs, audio, the software, the privacy stuff nobody mentions, by the only thing that matters once you've spent $3,000, which one still looks right in the room you're going to watch it in. For years, not for the first 10 minutes. No brand pays me. And the one that wins the spec sheet is not necessarily the one that wins your living room. Before we even get into these two, there's a trap that catches almost everyone walking into that store. And it has nothing to do with which brand you like. It's the demo mode. Every television on that wall, Samsung, LG, doesn't matter, is running a vivid or dynamic picture setting with the brightness and saturation cranked past anything you'd actually want at home, paired with slow, oversaturated nature footage built specifically to punch through bright ceiling lights. Gamma gets flattened. Color temperature gets pushed cool and blue, because cool blue reads as sharp under fluorescent lighting. Local dimming, if the set even has it in that mode, gets set to maximum aggression so blacks look inkier than they'll ever look at home. That is not the television. That is the setting talking. Here's the tell if a screen looks almost aggressively bright and oversaturated from 10 feet away under store lighting. That's demo mode, not the panel. The real picture, the one you'll actually live with, is one menu away on either of these filmmaker mode, or a proper calibrated preset, both of which target roughly 100 nits reference brightness and D65 white point, the same standard the movie was actually color graded against. Ask a store associate to switch either display into filmmaker mode before you judge anything. If they hesitate or don't know where that setting lives, that alone tells you something about how seriously that store treats picture accuracy versus how hard they want to move inventory. Quick one before we get into the two you're actually deciding between. Be honest, do you know whether the TV you own right now has a matte or a glossy screen? Most people have genuinely never thought about it. Drop your guess in the comments. And if this is useful so far, hit like it's the only way this reaches the next person about to trust the price tag over their own room. Let's start with the one that wins almost every argument on paper, the Samsung S95H. Let me be completely fair to it first, because it earns that. This is Samsung's flagship QD OLED for 2026, and the panel chemistry is genuinely different from a standard OLED. Instead of white organic subpixels filtered through red, green, and blue color filters, which is how traditional OLED panels work, and loses real brightness at that filtering stage, Samsung fires a blue OLED light source through a layer of quantum dots that convert part of that light into red and green. No color filters stealing photons on the way out. That's the actual engineering reason this panel can get so bright without the color washing out the way older OLEDs used to at high brightness. On raw numbers, it is not close. Independent testing has clocked it well north of 2,000 nits in small highlights. A sunset, a lightsaber, chrome-catching light. This thing has more punch in those moments than anything else at this size and price. It also covers roughly 89% of the wide BT.2020 color space, which is a genuinely large gamut for a consumer television. Pair all of that with Samsung's glare-free matte coating, and you've got a television that's engineered end to end to fight a bright room and win. If picture in a sunlit living room were the only thing that mattered, this video would be over right here. But the question today isn't which one wins the brightest room in the store. It's which one you'll still love in the room you actually have. And here's the honest trade-off the spec sheet will never volunteer. That matte coating that kills reflections so effectively? In a room with real ambient light, not the pitch-black demo booth, your actual living room in the evening with a lamp on it also scatters that light across the panel's surface. And OLED's entire reason for existing, the whole premise you're paying flagship money for, is true. Absolute black every pixel, switching fully off. So in a lit room, that same matte layer that's protecting you from a mirror-like reflection is also quietly turning a should-be black night scene into a soft, hazy gray. You're not losing brightness. You're losing the one specific thing OLED was supposed to give you over every other panel type on the market. And no Dolby Vision. Samsung has never supported it on any of its TVs, and the S95H doesn't break that streak. You get HDR10, HDR10+, and Samsung's newer HDR10+ Advanced instead, which is a genuinely capable royalty-free alternative and does dynamic, scene-by-scene metadata the way Dolby Vision does. The catch is that HDR10+ has to actually be embedded in what you're watching, and while it's grown a lot on streaming, Dolby Vision still has the wider footprint across films specifically. For most streaming, most of the time that's a non-issue. But if you actually care about getting the studio's intended tone mapping on the format most films still ship in, that gap is real, not a footnote. On gaming, to be fair to it again, 4 HDMI 2, 1 inputs, 165 Hz at 4K, ALLM, and both FreeSync Premium Pro and G-Sync compatibility, so it plays nicely with either an NVIDIA or AMD graphics card without you having to think about which ecosystem you're locked into. That side of the television is genuinely excellent and near feature complete. Then there's the part that never makes it onto a spec sheet at all. In December 2025, the Texas Attorney General sued Samsung along with LG, Sony, Hisense, and TCL over automatic content recognition. That's the tech built into Tizen that fingerprints whatever's on your screen roughly twice a second. From any source cable box, game console, a laptop plugged in over HDMI, doesn't matter, and phones that fingerprint home so it can be matched against a content library and used to build an advertising profile. Samsung settled first in February 2026, agreeing to real, clear consent screens for Texas users going forward, which tells you plainly what that tech was doing before anyone made them stop. It's a toggle you can turn off, buried a few menus deep under terms and privacy. But you can turn it off, and it wasn't there in the first place are two very different sentences, and it's worth knowing which one you're actually getting. So who is the S95H actually for? Buy it if your room has real, uncontrolled, daylight big windows, no blackout curtains, afternoon sun landing directly on that wall, and what you want most is the single brightest, most eye-catching picture money can buy at this size. Plus a genuinely excellent gaming setup that doesn't care which brand of graphics card you own. Skip it if you keep your room dim and controlled, or if you watch enough Dolby Vision content on physical media or specific apps to actually notice when it's missing. Be honest how much light actually hits your TV wall at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday, in the exact season you're in right now. That answer decides more than the nit count ever will. Here's a slightly less comfortable question. How many hours a day is your current television actually sitting in direct light versus a properly dimmed room, and be specific, not just sometimes? Sit with that for a second before you keep watching. And if you're already leaning one way, hit like again. It genuinely helps this reach the next person before they overspend on the wrong pick. Now the other side of this, the LG C6. Here's the framing almost nobody gets right, so let's be fair to this one too. The C6 isn't the consolation prize. In its standard sizes, the 42, 48, 55, and 65-inch models, it's a traditional walled panel, white organic subpixels through color filters with a glossy finish. And that glossy screen does something the Samsung's matte coating structurally cannot. In a properly lit or dimmed room, it holds onto true, inky black, because there's no diffusion layer scattering ambient light back at you. No haze, no wash. Full stop. The trade-off sits on the other side of that same coin, more visible. Mirror-like reflection if your light is genuinely uncontrolled, but the contrast itself never gets compromised the way it can on the Samsung. And here's the twist for this specific year that changes the whole comparison. The C6 isn't staying in its usual lane in 2026. The 77 and 83-inch models, badged C6H specifically to mark the difference, get LG's upgraded primary ERG tandem panel. That's a genuinely different panel architecture. Two full OLED emissive layers stacked on top of each other instead of one, which roughly doubles the light output per subpixel before you even touch processing. It's the same fundamental panel family that powered last year's flagship, $3,000 plus Gallery Series G5. So depending on the size you're buying, this isn't flagship versus budget the way it's always been in past years. At 77 inches and up, you're getting genuine flagship brightness and color volume at a mid-range price point. LG quietly undercutting its own top-tier lineup with its own mid-range series. It also supports Dolby Vision, the way every LG has for years. Full stop. No fallback tone mapping, no compromise on that format regardless of size or tier. And on the audio side, it passes Dolby Atmos and DETX bit streams uncompressed over ear to an outboard soundbar or receiver. And it supports Dolby Atmos Flex Connect, so it can also act as a wireless hub for LG's own Atmos speaker system if you go down that road later. On gaming, the C6 lineup also runs 4 HDMI 2.1 ports at 165 Hz, with VRR and ALLM a genuine jump from last year's C5, which topped out at 144 Hz, so this generation actually closes a gap that used to separate the C-series from LG's higher tiers on the gaming side specifically. But here's the honest part, because I promised you no cheerleading for either side. The smaller C6 sizes, the 55 and 65-inch models most people are actually buying, do not get that tandem panel. And they don't get the brightness boost that comes with it. Brightness there sits meaningfully below what the Samsung puts out at the same size. In a genuinely bright room, the gap flips against LG. You'll notice the dimmer picture. And the glossy versus matte trade-off starts working against you instead of for you. Because now you've got both a dimmer panel and more visible reflection at the same time. And on the software side, WebOS carries the same reputation Tizen does: cluttered navigation, ad-forward home screen, occasional slowdown after a year or two of app updates piling up. LG settled its own Texas Acre lawsuit in May 2026, months behind Samsung, over the exact same underlying issue: fingerprinting viewing content and monetizing it without clear consent. Same fix. 2LG calls the toggle Live Plus, and it's buried under General Settings rather than the Privacy menu, which is its own small piece of friction. So who's the C6 actually for? Buy it if you keep a room you can genuinely control: curtains, dimmable lighting, no windows staring the screen down, and you want accurate color and true black over raw brightness. Especially if you're watching a lot of Dolby Vision content, or you already own an ARC soundbar you want full Atmos pass-through on. And if your size and budget stretch to 77 inches, that C6H tier is arguably the smartest single buy of either option this year you're getting last year's flagship panel performance at this year's mid-range price. Skip the standard 55 or 65-inch C6 specifically if your room is the bright, sun-drenched kind. That size tier just doesn't have the brightness headroom to win that particular fight, no matter how good the color accuracy is. All right, one word, comments, right now. Samsung or LG? I actually read these, so don't just scroll past this one. Let's ground all of that in actual figures, because it's been a lot of narrative so far, and you deserve the numbers plainly, no spin. Samsung S95H, peak highlight brightness measured north of 2,000 nits in small window tests. Color coverage over roughly 89% of BT.2020, 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs at 165 Hz, no Dolby Vision, matte anti-reflective coating. LG C6, standard sizes, brightness in the 13 to 1500 nit range. A moderate step up from last year's model, 4 HDMI 2.1 inputs at 165 Hz, full Dolby Vision and Atmos pass-through, glossy coating. LG C6H, 77-inch and up, brightness potentially north of 2,200 nits, the same tier as last year's flagship, same Dolby Vision and Atmos support, same glossy black advantage, carried up into the larger sizes where it actually competes on brightness too. The honest translation: under 77 inches, the brightness gap is real and it favors Samsung outright. At 77 inches or bigger, the LG closes that gap almost entirely, and still keeps the black level and Dolby Vision advantage the Samsung structurally can't touch at any size. 4 rules that apply no matter which one you end up buying. I added 1 to the usual 3, because this comparison specifically has an extra wrinkle worth knowing. 1. Go stand in the actual room, at the actual time of day you'll watch television, before you decide anything. Not now, on your phone, comparing spec sheets in bed. Look at where the light hits that wall at 7 p.m., in the season you're actually in. 15 minutes of that tells you more than every number in this video combined. 2. Before either of these goes into daily use, open the privacy settings and turn the acre tracking off. On Samsung, it's under Terms and Privacy, labeled Viewing Information Services, alongside a separate toggle for interest-based advertising worth switching off in the same visit. On LG, it's Live Plus, under General Settings. Then a separate User Agreements menu for voice data and ad personalization. Costs you nothing, changes nothing about the picture, and it turns off the exact fingerprinting that got both companies sued in the first place. 3. If you're buying at 77 inches specifically, double-check whether the model number you're looking at actually carries the H suffix before you pay flagship-adjacent money for it. LG C6 without the H, even at 77 inches, is a different, dimmer panel than the C6H. That single letter is the entire difference between a flagship tier panel and a standard one at that size, so confirm it on the box, not just in the aisle display. 4. If you're paying for an extended warranty, ensure the real risk, not the one the salesperson points at. The genuine early risk on either of these is shipping damage on a thin panel or an early uniformity issue in the first few months, not some 5 years from now scenario built to scare you into a plan you don't need. Read what the plan actually covers before you pay for it, and check whether the manufacturer's standard warranty already handles the early failure window on its own. One more thing before we close this out, because this is exactly where people get pulled off the real decision. Refresh rate, upscaling processors, AI-branded picture modes with their own marketing names, none of that is the decision that matters here. Both of these run 165 Hz, both have a genuinely capable AI upscaling chip behind them. And on a normal couch, at a normal viewing distance, you will not consciously register the difference between their processors in daily use. The coating and the panel tier matte versus glossy, standard wold versus tandem, is genuinely 90% of how this television looks in your actual room, every single day, for years. Get that part right, and the refresh rate number and the processor name are rounding errors next to it. So, fast recap, in order. Store demo mode the trap. Ignore everything the showroom setting shows you, and ask to see either TV in filmmaker mode before judging anything. Samsung S95H, the brightness king. Best for a genuinely bright, uncontrolled room, and for gamers who want cross-platform Verter support. Worst for anyone chasing deep black in ambient light, or wanting Dolby Vision. LG C6 standard sizes the accurate, true black pick for a room you can control, with a real brightness ceiling if your room fights back. LG C6H, 77-inch and up, the one that closes the brightness gap and keeps the black level and Dolby Vision advantage. If the size and budget work, this is the one I'd point most people at this year. So back to where we started. The one that stops you in your tracks under store lighting isn't always the one you'll still love looking at on a random Tuesday evening 3 years from now. Go stand in your actual room, at the actual hour you'll actually be watching, before you decide anything else. If this saved you from the expensive mismatch, hit like and subscribe. It's the only way this reaches the next person about to trust the price tag over their own living room. Next video. Exact picks by budget tier for this year. Named, so you walk in knowing precisely which one to point at.